Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we are actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can still all be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Imperfect Momming. I am your host, Alicia Lyons, and today we have Virginia Callens Gregg with us. Welcome, Virginia.
Thank you.
So tell our mommy listeners a little bit about you and what you do.
Well, I'm retired now, which is fun, but I'm also busier now than ever before. And one of the things I'm doing is starting work on competency-based education as well as on self-definition. And they both do smack a lot of mommying.
Absolutely. I remember when we talked earlier that I absolutely loved this idea of competency-based education. Do you want to kind of explain a little bit about that? Maybe I'm the only geek in the crowd, but
Well, actually, I first ran into that in my undergraduate degree, where my teacher ed program did have competency-based as their method of teaching and of teaching us, as well as teaching us how to teach. I, however, never did teach secondary. My first teaching job was in a university, and partially, I think, because of that type of a background. What the heck is it then? Well, how often have you, if you remember, or your kids come home and say, I don't get this math, this science, we'll just use math. Mm-hmm. And they take a quiz and they fail it, but they go back and study. But by the time they really get it, they're halfway through the next unit, the class is. So they take the second quiz. They understand the first one perfectly, but they're not making the second unit. And so they're failing or getting a bad grade anyway. And this can go on for the quarter or the year, however they're teaching. And the student in the end very possibly knows all the information, but the test grades on X date don't show that. And so they may get a C, a D, an F for that course.
Yeah.
And to me, that's teaching for the content, to make sure you get everything in instead of teaching for the student. Just like parenting, I guess, one thing that when I do talk to families is that you often push the rule because you made the rule, not because there isn't an exception. I mean, what is so great about 2 more bites?
Right.
Can you imagine yourself sitting there if you were full, sitting in a restaurant, and somebody goes, 2 more bites? 2 more bites? You can't. I'm not paying this bill until, and we're not leaving until you eat your 2 more bites. Finish those green beans, please. No.
I mean, I kind of have the opposite problem where I'm like, okay, I really need to stop with these 2 more bites.
There you go. Right. But you can make the decision.
Right.
Now, when you consider how many people are starving in all these other countries and they're still living, and many of them are coming here for an education who grew up very poor, very hungry, very malnourished, your kid's not going to die if he doesn't eat those 2 bites.
Right.
But because you said it, it becomes the rule, and they're defying you if they don't do it. And it's you're getting into a whole different world. Right. It isn't about health. It isn't about obedience. It's about power and manipulation in many degrees.
And it really does. I had a thought that just kind of escaped me, but
Hey,
um,
been
it it
there.
it warps how we see food,
Mhm.
and that's one of the reasons that I never employed that you're going to sit there and until your plate is clean, is
Mhm.
because of those issues that it creates surrounding food.
Yes.
Finish your plate, eat those two more
Mhm.
bites, whatnot. And I
Mhm.
I personally let every parent make their own decision. I don't like to tell people how to do, because I don't know that my way is better. I just always parented in a way that felt right to me.
Mhm.
And since we're on the topic of food, that has been a struggle for me with my son, just because now it's hard to get him to eat different things, and he'll
Well,
say, go ahead.
I was to say there's a bit of psychology behind that too. As I think I might have told you before, that psychology of communication is really my love.
Uh-huh.
But the kids want to be thought of as mature, adult, whatever, and treated that way. So one thing I did was I have four sons, and well, they're grown now. But one thing I did was say, try your whatever it is, beets, mashed potatoes. It didn't matter. There was always something they didn't like. And no, they didn't want. I said, well, tell you what, your taste buds are probably too immature for that right now. So I'm not going to make you try it or eat it today. But sooner or later, you should check it out, because the older you get, the more I think you'll like it.
Yeah.
And doggone it, if they didn't dare try some stuff and after a while decide maybe they did like it,
Yeah.
because they saw it as a part of growing up as opposed to a punishment. There are a lot of things on those very, very basic taste buds that
Yeah.
do not sit well, and we forget that as adults.
Yeah.
We
And for
forget
my
that.
son, there's texture issues with
Mhm.
cooked vegetables versus raw vegetables. He'll
Mhm.
eat them raw. He just doesn't really like them cooked.
Mhm.
And just recently, we had a little sit down at dinner time where he said, "Oh, yeah, I like orange chicken," and he took a bite. "Ooh, my taste buds changed, so I don't like orange chicken."
Ah,
And
okay.
it's like, you know what? Your taste buds need to change back, or at least add some new stuff, because you keep eliminating things, but you don't add the new ones. So,
Yeah, yeah.
we have a good time. We have a good, communication. But I like that phrasing, that your taste buds haven't matured yet. And but they can't, and I think the important word is yet,
Mhm.
that they will
Well, and there
mature.
will always be some things they don't like.
Yeah.
So just because they taste something they don't like, it doesn't mean that they're going backwards. No, that's
Right.
not it. But as you get older, you eat more and more things,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, when I was growing up, we never had to be told to eat anything, mostly because if we didn't eat, we were hungry.
Right.
So whatever whatever was there is what we ate.
Yeah.
So
And you had a lot of siblings, right?
I have eight siblings.
That's right.
There are nine of us kids.
Yeah. Yeah, my mom had seven, and so I just
Mhm.
recently learned she doesn't like to share food. I had no idea.
Yeah. Yep. It it was strange. My mom told my one of my sisters once that she felt bad for me because I never had a childhood, she said. I remember a childhood just fine, but she said that I have an older brother. Get this now, 10 and a half months older.
Mhm.
So,
Irish
and then,
twins.
yes. And then three younger brothers, a little bit of a gap, and then my younger sister. So I basically was grown up with the boys. So I had to do the dishes, sweep the floors, mop the floors. Well, my mom would help in the fields and in the barns and whatever. And then I still did that also. So I did work a lot, but I still remember having fun. Not
Mhm.
a lot of new toys, but doggone it, dirt could be really, there's a lot of fun things you can do with dirt.
Yeah.
So,
And I like the perspective that you look at it, because there are two different ways to look at everything. There's probably infinite ways of looking at everything, but
mhm.
for simplification purposes, we'll say there's two different ways. And there's the one way is, I didn't have a childhood because I did all of this stuff. And what I heard you say was that you had a lot of fun in addition to all the responsibility that you had growing up, and that it was a positive. That's the feeling I got from what you said, that it was a positive influence on your life.
Well, yeah, there were a lot of negative things I can remember, but that just gave me, I think, something to base the good things against. Because I remember being really little and we had a dish pan on a kitchen table and I'd have to do the dishes while Mom was helping milk the cows. And she would come in and there was always water spread all over. And she'd kind of chastise me for that. Okay, one day she came in while I was still washing, it wasn't done, and she saw me kneeling on a stool, because I was too young yet to sit on it and be able to get into the dish pan. And I would take the dish in the dish pan, wash it, and take it out and move it over to the rinse. And water was running down my arms while I did that and onto the floor. I was too little for that setup. And she realized then that that was why I wasn't being messy.
Yeah.
I was just couldn't control where the water went.
Right.
And I don't know what we ever did about it. I still wash dishes. But.
Right. She probably had a towel cleaning it up afterwards, or maybe you got to clean it up.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we talked about too, speaking of perspective, is I don't remember how we came up with this, but I wrote it in my notes that you said, what if I was the kid and the kid was the adult? Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Speaking of the perspective.
If I can recapture that for a moment. Well, one thing that, and this isn't what we were talking about, but it is one thing that still comes to my mind when we talk about that, is that when we try to be friendly to our kids and strike up conversations with them, we often put them on the spot. What did you learn today at school? Did you have fun? Da, 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 da. Well, why do they have to self-disclose every minute? I mean, they probably have 1,000 thoughts going through their mind from first grade, from on up. They have their own head. I suggest you make a point of saying, who had a good day at school today? Let them talk about somebody else. They will eventually come to themselves if it's important. Did somebody have a really lousy day? Was there anything you could have done to help? Gosh, I hope that never happens to you. Isn't that what when we talk with adults and we gossip with them, we don't continually put them on the spot. Why did you do that? What were you thinking? No. So do that and have the kid also be able to ask you questions. I know I did that with my kids once, or not once, but off and on, about, who had the best day in school today? And one day they came home and said to me, Mom, who did something great at work today? No, nobody. No, but then I answered, but they picked up on it.
Yeah.
And what I recognize at work, what they recognize in their school, is really a magnifying glass into who they are.
Right.
A really bad day could have been someone who didn't know an answer. Why is that such a big thing for that kid? Well, it gives you something to talk about, that, maybe he was embarrassed or she was embarrassed, but that happens to all of us, and they'll get used to it. It's okay not to know. And then remember that you said that, because sometimes when they ask you something, doggone it, tell them, I really don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll have to figure that out.
And I like this, idea, because it gives a different question to ask the kids, because a lot of times you say, how was your day? Fine.
Yes.
What'd you do? Nothing. Really? You ceased to
because
exist for 8 hours.
You're asking them to self-disclose their most personal information. Maybe they ogled this person next to them that they really liked, and that was their big thing of the day. Well, they're not going to tell you that.
Yeah.
Unless the conversation opens up,
Right.
And you're the one to open that. I think you can be an awfully guilty parent by putting yourself in the position of too much responsibility. And I know that kind of sounds backwards maybe, but kids can take a lot of responsibility for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that kept my kids in line as much as a person could do is if they wanted to stay out late. Let's say they're in grade school, and I said, okay, go do this, but be home by 10. Why do you have to be home by 10? Well, I don't know. You tell me what can happen after 10. Well, if there's really nothing that can happen and they've got a plan, you might have to think of why they can't. Or you can't go to that party because I know there's going to be drinking there. No, I'm not going to drink, blah, blah, blah. Well, what happens if you do? What are you going to do? What happens if the kids tease you because you won't? What if a drunk guy wants to drive you home? What are you going to do? If your little brother or sister wanted to go to this party instead of you, what would you tell them? Would you say, sure, what the heck? Go. There's me drinking, that's okay. Go, have a good time. Usually, no. They're very protective of their family members.
Yeah.
And then you just remind them, well, that's my situation with you. And sometimes, even if you have a talk like that and you give in and say, okay, sounds like you got it together, go. So if you're going to call me if you have to, or you're going to stay overnight there or whatever, blah, blah, blah. If that's going to really be the way it happens, then it should work. Then I trust you.
Yeah. My boyfriend listens to a lot of podcasts, and he heard on one where they said, well, so there's two sides of every story. Like we know, well, there's actually three, there's your side, my side, and then the truth. But when in these situations, you kind of triggered this in my mind with, would you let your sibling, what would you tell your sibling about this party? Well, if you're in a situation where you're, talking about an argument you had with another person, what's their side of the story? Tell me what they would be saying. And it gets them to open up a different perspective and kind of confess what they did wrong.
Right.
without even really realizing it. But I mean, you can use that with an adult who's complaining about a situation, and you can use that with a kid who's complaining about a friend who, they wouldn't give me the basketball. Well, what are they saying?
Yeah.
Well, they said that I didn't ask nicely. So you're getting a different side of the story,
right,
without necessarily grilling them or calling them a liar or whatever the case may be.
And you can take that further too. Like, why did they think it wasn't nice? Was it your words, or was it the way you said those words? Or it was the action that you did while you were saying those words? There's get them to look at it. I think another really good technique in terms of relieving some of the responsibility on your shoulders and placing some of it rightfully so on the kids is have them be responsible in another way. If they do something that's wrong, I mean, you can lecture them and say, you shouldn't do this because, and they're, and they'll come, but I. And you're never going to win that argument. It may end, but no one really wins. Right. Instead, ask the kid, sit and think about that. And if you can think of anything probably not too good about that, come and tell me, and then we'll be done with it. I did that to my kids from they were really little. Sometimes they'd have to sit on the couch and think. Sometimes they'd have to stand in the corner and think. And there was more than once when I'd walk into a room and a kid was standing in a corner by himself. I thought, okay, let's see what happens. Later, they come out and say, Mom, and they explain what it was. And I'm not going to do that again because, and they will explain it. And they are learning their own level of critical thinking at that point.
Yeah.
Whatever they did at their young age is not so critical that it's going to be illegal or immoral or unethical even. It's just the societal norms that they're probably not adapting to too well.
Yeah.
And of course, you shouldn't push anybody down, but in their defense, we are born with those survival techniques and have to learn not to.
Right.
And the best way to learn is to teach yourself, which is a good part of competency basing again. And to teach yourself, you've got to think through it.
And, you know, I love the idea of personal responsibility because for me, that was a big thing. Taking personal responsibility of things where I was in the past blaming other people.
Mm-hmm.
Having that personal responsibility really was freeing. And it seems counterintuitive that way. But when we take responsibility, and responsibility is different than blame, you know, but when when we take responsibility for our actions or the part we played in a situation, then we're not being a victim by saying, well, they did this to me, they made me feel this way, et cetera, et cetera. And I have a girlfriend who we were just talking about this yesterday, that she literally feels responsible for everyone. And I said, well, who are you actually responsible for? And she said, me and my husband and my daughter. And I said, depending on your definition of responsible, yeah, you are responsible for your husband and your daughter. But really, you're responsible for yourself, and you're responsible for how you feel, and you're responsible for what you do. And that is true of every single person.
There's a word adjustment that I like to make to that, and that's you are responsible to them, not for them.
Yeah.
What you do and give in their direction needs to help them. But the success or the failure is not you. You're not doing it for them. You're doing it to them.
Yeah.
I had another crazy thought here too. But I don't remember it. However, when we talk about responsibility, there's, the pig pile effect where the kids keep blaming each other, and so one can end up being on the top, and when one gets his way, he always gets to do that. She got to do it last time. Well, actually, my situation was kind of funny. My husband really didn't like to do a lot of the things the kids did, and you don't want to make him do it and begrudge him. So I came up with this thing called PICS, and it was in the summer, PICKS, PICS. And it was once a week, and we took turns. We started with the kids, and mom and dad were in on it too. And they got to pick something that the family would do, some form of entertainment. And because we didn't have tons of money either, if the entertainment was free, then we could go out to eat or go to a movie or whatever. If the entertainment cost, then that was that. So they had to make these judgment calls. And here was the deal. You could not criticize what they said. You had to compliment them. You had to find something good about it, even if it is something you never would do or think of doing yourself. Because if you didn't, you missed your turn. And we did some of the strangest things. We sat at an airport with a two-way radio kind of thing and listened to the pilots talk as the planes ran off at one point. And we really looked forward to them. But it made the kids learn that they had to take responsibility enough so that someone wasn't really out in the cold with it, and that they did not try to change someone else's mind. Someone else's pick was just as good as their own.
Absolutely. I like that idea. I think I'm going to institute something similar for this summer, just because there's a lot of times where we don't have an idea of what to do. or we don't really want to do the idea that somebody suggests. And so I think that that's a really cool idea.
Well, yeah, and then it's like, oh, I don't want to do that. Well, let's try this. And pretty soon you spend more time arguing about what you're going to do than it was worth. But if someone says, we're going to in this one case, it was the Star Wars movie, and I kind of went, because I wasn't as much into Star Wars as they were. But yeah, we went, we all had a great time. I would never probably at that time, I would now, but at that time didn't know enough about it that I probably wouldn't have gone.
Yeah.
Or would have tried to talk them out of it.
And then you got an experience, whether you like the movie or not, you still got the experience with the family, and it can be positive or negative, and you get to choose which way you want to hold on to that memory. So that's awesome. What one piece of advice would you like to offer to our moms listening today?
There's a technique. Think of a triangle. Okay. This is the POX theory. P means person, O means other person, and the X is an intervening variable. So let's put the P on top, we'll put the O here and the X here. If you're the person on top, X is your friend, and O is sports. Remember your math, where a positive times a positive is a positive, a negative times a negative times a negative, I think it's got to go, I don't know, is a positive, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I won't take much time going into that. You can look it up if you don't know. But if you like your friend, there's a plus here. If your friend likes sports, there's a plus there. If you don't like sports, there's a minus here. That's an unbalanced situation. What can be done to help it? What can be done? In many cases, and this is true of many marriages, these two decide not to like each other.
Yeah.
Because somebody is too stubborn to give this up, and someone is too stubborn to go that route. And you come up with more and more reasons why that person is a bad person. As opposed to thinking, I could do something else instead of watching sports. I could learn to like it. I could not care that this person likes it, or I could not go to absolutely every game. I do not have to be on 3 leagues or whatever it is. But we take the line of least resistance, and the line of least resistance is very often against the person.
Yeah.
Because they can talk back to us, they can discuss us, they can counteract us, where that sports or that whatever it's going to be on the other end isn't going to talk back.
Yeah. And just that little tweak is something that could change everything. I'd never heard that before, so I appreciate that. That's a really cool, I'll have to look that up for sure.
You can do that with food.
All right.
Well, the real complicated part with it, and I do complete seminars on this, is when you start to add in other triangles. The kid likes the dad, the kid likes sports, the kid likes you. So the kid's not having a problem, except this kid and grandma and then whatever. And when you find out that if you change between a person and an object, your results are usually good.
Yeah.
You might take it in the shorts for a while, but you get used to it. And it's, just something else. You change the person and things tumble all around. Changing this plus or minus affects all these other triangles that are attached to it.
Yeah.
Changing this plus or minus does also change those, but they aren't that important.
Right.
Your friends might not like it that you're not on 3 bowling leagues, but they're not gonna shoot your tires out or anything.
Right. Is there a book that's been really impactful for you in personal development or parenting?
Oh gosh.
I know it's really hard to narrow it.
Not one. I would think that if people are interested in this triangle, they can look up Heider, Heider, Joseph Heider. He was a mathematician, by the way, and he has become a communication theorist because communications people go to him or went to him, for a lot of advice after he came up with this.
Got it.
There's one person that, without any intention of my own or his own, that really influenced me, and I didn't realize it until I was a lot older. And that was, I wanted to raise sheep when I was a kid. That was going to be my career. So he bought me 3 sheep. Next summer, I wanted more sheep, and he didn't have room for them. So I, said, well, move these pigs over there, or do this or whatever. And it was no. So cut to the chase. Finally, one day he said to me, "You want more sheep? You build them a sheep shed." So I did.
Yeah.
Okay. It ended up I had to be 8 by 8 because I used standard boards. It had 2 windows in it. It had a door. It had a roof. And when we sold the farm just a couple of years ago, it finally was taken down. It had stood for almost 60 years. I was 11 when I built that sheep shed. But he told me to do it with all the confidence that if I really wanted to do it, I really wanted those sheep, I could. And I see that he did the same thing to the other kids, like, you are responsible for some things. If you can't make it work, then it's not going to work. It's not going to be the end of the world. But if you really want it, make it work.
Absolutely. That's so true in so many areas of our life. And so where can our listeners find you if they have resonated with you and want to know more about you?
Okay. My email address is Callens, Callens, Gregg, as in the shorthand, Gregg. People don't know what shorthand is anymore, do they? At Gmail. Callens Gregg.
Perfect. And that'll be in the show notes as well. Well, thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate your message and you showing up and pouring into the listeners. So I hope you have a great rest of your evening and keep helping more mamas.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right, guys, we'll see you on the next episode. And until then,
let your kids be responsible.
There you go. I love it. Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit AlysiaLyons.com. That's AlysiaLyons.com. See you next time.